So Gore and I were just talking backstage, kind of wondering, I mean, we're gonna do this conversation before the film, trying to avoid spoilers, but we were wondering how many of you have never seen The Ring? Wow, so quite a few. So you might have to close your ears for a few parts of this, but I figured, Gore, we could just start at, back, this was almost 25 years now, when you first saw the original film, Ring, the Japanese original, what struck you about it? What kind of ultimately led you to making this film?
Yeah, it was interesting. Never done a Q&A before a movie. It's nice to know some people haven't seen the movie, so that's, I'm gonna have to reevaluate. I just trying to remember, and I put myself back in 2002, what was happening. I was shooting the first week of Pirates 1. We shot late, and I missed the premiere of this movie, of The Ring. And I remember going to the after party, and Brian Cox, who was kind of a son of a bitch. On the shooting of the movie, he's just a really grumpy guy. I mean, he's notoriously grumpy. But he came up to me and said, I think we have something. I think he called me a ball bag, which I think is a compliment. I remember that, and I remember before the movie, I was prepping something called Catch Me If You Can at DreamWorks, which I didn't shoot. Steven took that. We couldn't get to the number, and he ended up directing that movie, and probably for a different number because he's Mr. Spielberg. But and then right after that, he took that. We couldn't get that going. I made 2 movies at DreamWorks, and they were really great. They were, those movies weren't exactly hits. They didn't lose money, but they were not big hits. So you don't really get 3 at-bats, and I do appreciate my time there. Was kind of, they were just starting out as a company. And right after that, they sent me this videotape, which was Hideo Nakata's Ringu, and it was such a shitty dub. It was like the whole movie looked like the videotape. And I couldn't, it wasn't dubbed, but you could kind of immediately tell Hideo had a really great sense of the story he was telling. And I knew we were going to have to, there's a few homages to this, I can't say that now. Some people have seen the movie.
Just leave the room.
There's a few places that we were trying to be, true to what they had. But also knew immediately we had to kind of change some things. Aaron Kruger, who's a great writer, wrote the script for Arlington Road, which I always really loved. We knew for a Western audience we'd have to get a little more sense of something's accruing in terms of the images on the video and what's occurring in the movie. So it was immediately the challenge to kind of how do you adapt it for a Western audience, and our need for something, I wouldn't say necessarily linear, but the sense that things are accruing.
Did you always, before this, the 2 films you made for DreamWorks, I think, were Mouse Hunt and The Mexican, right? Those are very different than The Ring, obviously. Did you always envision yourself making a horror film, or were you itching to do that, or did it just kind of come to you?
Well, I always loved, I think I saw The Exorcist when I was way too young. That movie fucked me up. And The Shining, The Shining obviously is a masterpiece. But it was weird, I gotta be honest, it was weird, feeling like you're making a B movie. There's something, I remember starting out shooting that film going, something feels like I'm framing up the doorknob shot and I'm thinking, I'm using someone else's language. It took a while to start to go, there are tropes to this genre, and you need to kind of, before you usurp them, you need to kind of embrace them. And that took a little while. And then you start, you think about those movies, even the great ones, it's like you're having The Devil's Baby, or Indian Burial Ground, or a Haunted Hotel. The premise is, they're always kind of pulp, and it's only in the execution you hope to elevate them. So that took a little while to kind of get underneath that and feel comfortable with that. And sound is kind of the key. Sound is the key. That sort of Friedkin's first 20 minutes of The Exorcist is, you're in a darkened room for 20 minutes and it's it's loud and it's quiet and it's jackhammers and sunsets and dogs barking. So by the time Linda Blair pees on the carpet, you're completely fucked. You're in a state. So I think that was the real thing to that genre, is all about 20 minutes before the event. I think that was really an educational process, and I guess that's the point where I think through sound has really started to kind of like embrace it.
Speaking back to seeing classic horror films way too young, I saw The Ring way too young, and I attribute that really to it being PG-13, which is kind of this film, is partially famous for just like being one of the scariest movies ever made, and like so many people seeing it too young. Were you involved in that process of making it a PG-13 movie? Was that where it started, or did it kind of become that?
Yeah, we really we worked hard. I think we submitted it like 5 times. We were R-rated movie. Submitted it, and the studio really wanted a PG-13. So I think we traded 2 shits for a fuck. It was like the strangest negotiation. And then we had to recut like the Brian Cox bathtub scene where there was some blood and things. It actually got scarier in the process, which was interesting. And you always do, when you submit, you always like, just turn that down a little bit, So, because they can give you R for just intensity. Sometimes so you're kind of trying to soften it the best you can, and then you kind of put it all back in your final mix.
I agree. I think that's just why it works. Another thing I love about the film is, just the visual design and this very peculiar greenish blue that a lot of people speak and write about. A lot of films afterwards tried to imitate, but you got it so right and it's so unsettling. And I believe most of it was all done in camera with lighting. It wasn't done in post-production. Can you talk a little bit about like developing that when you landed on that look?
Yeah, well, the cinematographer Boyan Bazelli, who had made like 100 Abel Ferrara movies, and then was somehow persona non grata. I don't know, probably for caring. It's usually that's when you get blacklisted. And I really fought for him. We've done a bunch of commercials together and stuff. And I brought him to the attention. At first, it was I don't know what occurred, but for some reason he wasn't. They kept saying no, and then finally I talked to Stephen, and he said, "Sure, if you believe in it, go for it." And I don't think anybody has a better sense of the photochemical process than Boyan Bazelli. He's just a master at going to the lab and talking filtration and talking about hue and color saturation. And so we did a lot of work early on, but really, he's a master at that.
Were you nervous at all, just like walking into this, and then you couldn't really go back and change it, or were you like confident in the beginning that like this is about the look and?
Oh yeah, no, we've done some tests early on, so we kind of knew what we were doing.
I'm curious also just about the location, choosing to shoot in Washington, the Pacific Northwest. I mean, that just seems so central to this story and the sort of dampness and everything. How did you, was that you or that, like the screenwriting process?
Well, it's probably an interesting segue into the fact that, we were prepping that movie when 9/11 happened. And we were, actually our production designer, Tom Duffield, was he was on the East Coast, and we were scouting on the East Coast, and he actually had a ticket he was on one of the flights, going to be on one of the flights out of Boston, and we had talked the night before, and he had said, "Should I come back?" And I said, "Well, go check out some lighthouses in Maine," and he stayed, and then we were prepping, and obviously, once 9/11 happened, we kind of, the whole film went down for a second, and then we kind of knew we had to reset it in the Pacific Northwest. But I bring up 9/11 because I think there was something, we spent a lot of time talking about this and arguing about this with the studio, because DreamWorks is not notoriously known as a horror genre. It's like basically Amblin making a horror movie. So there was a lot of concern about this concept of the transferable nature of hatred, right? Like, you do something to me, I justify doing something to you. And I think that, it was like a palpable sense of like, well, why me? Why is this happening? And that's like a real horror, right? And I think, the studio was adamant about, not like the premise order to save yourself, you have to, you know. Where I was like, but that's what the genre does so well. It taps into those things. And you have Damien holding the hand of the president at the end of The Omen. I think that it's not a happy ending, and it's a kind of what's going to happen next moment. So, and I think I think the film sort of tapped into that at the time.
I also want to talk about just making the actual tape that you're all going to see that's in this film. Was that the first thing you did, or did you have that as the reference? I mean, it had to work, right? It had to be like really get under your skin in a way that the audience can quite put their finger.
Yeah, we made it in pre-production, and some of the stuff's inspired and certainly taken from Ringu, and about half of it's original stuff. You try to bring your own personal nightmare, to it. I can't talk about it. It's so weird doing a Q&A for the movie.
Sorry.
But it was important that we, I think in the original movie, it's just, there's something about the sort of Japanese culture that allows, like, that's why Miyazaki movies are so amazing to me. Like, I don't quite understand what's going on in, Spirited Away still, but I love it, and I think we had the original movie was sort of like, what's happening? We had to kind of practically design the video so that as the movie's progressing, you're feeling like those images are reoccurring in a way that sort of, the hand of the inevitable is sort of pulling the camera down the corridor and things like that. So that was the biggest challenge. We shot it in pre-production. And at that time, I was really into this book by Murakami called The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle. I don't know if anybody's read that book, but it's really like amazing kind of dream logic, and has to be trapped in a well and other things in that book. So trying to bring as much of that to it as well.
Did the novel that the original film was based on, was that offer a framework as well, or was that to the levels removed?
Not really.
Yeah, sure. Curious just about the casting, which is a really interesting process. You weren't casting movie stars. Naomi Watts wasn't a huge star at the time. How did you come to find her, and what made you know it was her?
Yeah, I met with the person running marketing at DreamWorks, was Terry Press, and I said, do I need a name for this movie? And she's like, absolutely. And I felt like, but that's not, like, you think of Jamie Lee Curtis and you think of Sissy Spacek, and like these movies make movie stars. You don't need to put a movie star in these. But so they had me meet, Gwyneth Paltrow and Jennifer Connelly and some other people, and I don't think they liked me, but I was also like, I can't imagine I'm coughing up like this disgusting thing, I can't, I just couldn't, it didn't seem like the right fit, and then I was in London with Denise Chan, casting director, and Naomi Watts came and read, and she'd just done Mulholland Drive, and it was so clear she was Rachel Kelly. I was like, oh, done. And the studio, I think, was still feeling like that's not really enough of a name, and so I sent the backdoored the casting tape to Spielberg, and he was like, yeah. It's like, yeah, and the agents were like, what happened to the offer you were making for whatever? We're gonna, and that's why I think if you're an actor, if you come in and read, you can just steal the part.
Naomi really grounds this film. I mean, it's so like it's a supernatural plot. It's hard, but like you can imagine finding some of the things hard to believe. But because Naomi's kind of at the center, I think, and brings such an intensity, it all like works so well. So I'm curious, just talking, like, what were your conversations with her to kind of get this performance into, like, what was she like on set?
That's 22 years ago. She just goes for it. She just, like, we're doing takes, there's just snot coming out of her nose and shit like it. It's just, she's like, whoa, it's like you don't have to put your spurs in her. You're gonna pull back the reins, if anything, because she's just going to make it real. That's her job, and she takes it seriously. And so it wasn't, we talked about the movie. It's probably the least fun I've ever had making a movie. I should say that, because we're playing, Orville part or Ligeti, before, like, just to make sure everybody's feeling nauseous before we see action, you because you have to create this palpable sense of dread.
Right.
And you're wearing that every day in the rain in Seattle. So yeah, it was. Sometimes the fun movies don't come out great. Sometimes the brutal ones do.
Did the actor playing Aiden have fun? He's so great. I mean, how did you find him, and how did you? I mean,
Denise cast him. I think he's like a Mensa child. He's really, really wickedly smart. Yeah, we just knew it was him. We just 250 kids reading, and you're just like, that's the one.
And one other collaboration I want to mention is just Hans Zimmer's amazing score in this film. And this was your first film with him of many, so something must have clicked on the ring with him. What is your process with him like?
I remember that. So he was the music advisor for DreamWorks in general. So I met him on Mouse Up. He had recommended Bruce Fowler and then later Alan Silvestri. And so I'd always sort of show him a movie and ask him, and I brought him in and played him The Ring, and then I asked him, because I was thinking about Badalamenti, and I was like, what do you think of Badalamenti, who the great composer did Blue Velvet? And he said, what about me? And I was like, holy shit, okay, well, we don't really have a Hans Zimmer budget, but sure. And then he made it work. We were at his house, spent a lot of time at his house, and that became the beginning of a great partnership.
It's fantastic. I mean, his score, as you will hear, is just really wonderful. Just getting to around the time when this film was finally released, I guess my first question is, there's like sort of an infamous promotional strategy, and I'm wondering how true it is that the actual tapes would be dropped in public places, and were you involved in that at all? Did you know that was going on?
I mean, it's fascinating. So it's DreamWorks, right? So and about 2 years earlier was the Blair Witch Project. I think we think about that time. So we were sort of talking, who's going to go see this movie? And I had hired a company, and we started doing kind of early online stuff like actual missing children, and then sort of attaching it to the mythology of maybe they watched this videotape. And we got pretty quickly.
Wait, what?
Yeah. We pretty quickly got called into the office of DreamWorks Terry Press, and they were like, what the fuck are you doing? And they were like, we got our hands hit with the ruler, and they're like, we're not some indie, like, this is DreamWorks, like, we're not doing that. Liability, etc. And it was weird because then I think Blair Witch was like the torch, the candle, and I think now studios are like carrying that torch. But it was interesting on this film to see them slowly start to embrace. I mean, from that meeting to when the movie started coming out, they started, the same woman who was operating as Terry Press, she started buying 30-second time on local stations where they play like the Clapper, Clap On, or the Jinsu Knives stuff, or like it's 3 a.m. It's super cheap, 30 seconds local TV, and then she just play the video with it wasn't like there was no like coming to theater near you. It didn't say The Ring. It didn't say DreamWorks, nothing. And I just kept thinking, man, I was like, if you're doing a double shift at Taco Bell, it's 3 a.m, you're like, loading up a bong load, and you're like, I'm fucking just, it's gonna fuck with your head.
That's insane. I mean, some of it must have paid off, because this film became a huge hit, and it really was after a few weeks of it being out, word of mouth.
It was the weirdest. So when you release a film, there's the opening weekend, and then there's like the 50% drop, which is typical, and that's why they kind of, when you open your movie, they know basically where you're going to end up, because they go, okay, you're going to drop 50% second weekend, and if you drop 48, they're like, woo, and if you drop 62, they're like, you're screwed. So, but this opened, at like, I think 15 million or something, and nobody was popping champagne corks. They were like, okay. And then it went up 22% the next weekend, and then it was like down 3%, and then like down 7%, and down 30. It just stayed. I think the fact that it was PG-13, it was kind of water cooler moment for 14-year-olds. Their lockers going, have you seen that fucking fucking you know, so that was just a weird, I've never had that. And it's kind of a phenomenon. I don't think there's many movies that behave that way.
And I mean, it has this remarkable staying power. I mean, obviously, most of the people in this room have seen it, and it has become a classic. I'm curious what your personal relationship is to this film. It inspired so many other, I guess they call them the J-horror remakes, and this was really the first one, and by far the best one, I think. So, what's your relation to this movie now? And do you think about its legacy?
Not really, but I do. No, I think I love the genre. I think I went through a process of always respecting it, but never thinking I would do that. And then that movie, and again, sort of mentioning sound, that was sort of. I think there's so much you can do in that genre. I'm really like not just a fan anymore, but kind of like eager to get back.
Hopefully that's next after this next one in January. Would you like to say anything else before we watch The Ring?
No, just try to transport yourself back. I mean, we think times are weird right now, like the world is weird. I mean, it was pretty weird back then too. Try to go back in time and enjoy actual film.
Gore,